What Marie did was she emailed the pictures to me, and I put it on a folder, and so that my computer is connected to them, or your computer, you can put it
I
on
don't
your
put
own.
all of mine in an email, and I'll have to just Gary sent,
Okay. And then we can connect, like, here, it would be anybody's laptop, to the projector, and that's what you're seeing out
That's
there.
great.
But yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So I have the script for you.
Great. Well, I hope you can match the numbers with the letters,
I think I can do that.
but it'll at least be a clue as to when to change the picture.
Sure.
Well, it's nice to see some people out there.
Do you want to say something about the chat section?
This afternoon session?
Sure.
Oh, the chat session. Okay.
And it's not so much reparations for peace, it's justice.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can't have peace without justice, and we know that now.
Yeah. She didn't know.
Oh, she didn't know. Okay. Well, I'll tell her. But, wait, with the hearing issues we have here, and then microphone, it's just, you feel a little rough.
I guess that was the signal to start. Okay. Welcome to the September program of the Timbercrest Seniors for Peace. Seniors for Peace here is open to everybody. We have no membership list or dues, and we usually gather here in the chapel for nearly an hour the morning of the fourth Thursday, September through May. And we're fortunate now to have new equipment where we can bring this program to you in the way in which you're seeing or hearing it. So we want to thank Brian Daniels, Laura Stone, Kelly McCombs, and Heather Cruz for making all of this work, and probably the administration as well. So right now, the Seniors for Peace Steering Committee is composed of Dean Beery, Gary Heisler, Jan Rhodes, Lois Snyder, and myself. Ruth Bowman served with this team for many, many years, and we're sorry that she felt she needed to retire. But we do have a couple new residents who may be ready to join the steering committee soon, and we hope that happens. This afternoon at 2:30, the Timbercrest chat will feature Jan Rhodes talking about reparations for justice, and this is part of our Peace Week program. Next month, October 22nd, the fourth Thursday, Dean Beery will be leading a program in the area of white supremacy. So plan to be with us either in the chapel if we're able or on Channel 2 again. If you can see the sweater I have on, and I'm not going to move this right now, I purchased it in Austria in 2001, and these white flowers represent the national flower of Austria, the Edelweiss. And now for the program of alternative service at the Karlischule. Here are these selections from Luke 6. Jesus said, "But I tell you who hear me, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Turn, give. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. Love your enemies. Do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." And from Romans 12, 9 to 21. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. And a quote in this Romans passage from Proverbs, "If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Many of us can remember something about the 1950s, but for some it might be getting harder to do that. We Americans were going to college and starting our adult life pretty much in ease and comfort. But in Europe was a long way from having recovered from the physical and emotional ruins of World War II. The Church of the Brethren, through its service committee, had been sending relief supplies and workers to Europe for some time. Heifer Project and Brethren Volunteer Service were up and running. Christians from all over were wanting to help those who had been former enemies of our country. In 1953, Don Dernbaugh, the director of Brethren Service in Austria, heard about and became interested in the project in Vienna. It was his interest in and implementation of the work that became Karlischule. I'll tell you more about that project, but first you need to know what Karlischule is. And while I'm telling you about that project, picture some of these people that we know who are part of the project. Wade Bollinger, from right here in North Manchester, was one of the earliest boys on the project, and they were always called boys, even though they were in their early 20s. Others who came a few years later were Tom Popst from Wabash, that's Pauline Popst's son, Harold Ralston from Fort Wayne, and my husband, Don Willoughby, who at that time was from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Paul Weaver from Huntington, Indiana, was also an early worker. In fact, he was the very first in November of 1953. So this area had quite a few workers on the Karlischule in the early years. Can we think about these men just out of their teens? For a background story about Karlischule, I'm going to be quoting a lot from Merlin E. Garber. This Merlin Garber is the same person who took in Bob Richards in Champaign, Illinois, some years before this project began. Merlin was the on-site director when the project came to a close in 1961. The first section about the symbol is the symbol of Protestantism. One of the most famous squares in the heart of Vienna, Austria, stands in the square stands a building known to many around the world as Karlschule. It's a familiar landmark and well known to the Viennese, at least it was in the 1990s. However, if you were to ask a policeman on the corner, "Where is Karlschule?" he would look at you with a puzzled expression and say, "Karlschule? I don't know what you mean, Karlschule." For the name is not familiar except to a minority of Austrians. The name was popularized by Americans. But when you explain further that you're looking for the Evangelische Schule am Karlsplatz, then the policeman's face would light up with recognition, and he would point to a large, imposing brick structure facing a green park on one of the city's main streets. Nearby is a memorial to the immortal Brahms of lullaby fame, and not far from this corner is the famed Vienna Opera House. The front of today's building, are we looking at it? As it was before, is adorned by statues of the four evangelists. Inside are terrazzoed floors, vaulted archways, long hallways, broad stairs, well-lighted rooms, automatic heat, and hundreds of students, many even coming to night school. The impressive thing about Karlschule, though, is not the physical facilities. The school itself is dwarfed by mammoth buildings in the center city of Vienna. It is the fact that this structure, which was rebuilt by some 120 men and also some women and youth in work camps, who gave over 20,000 work days, covering a period of 7 years. This structure is more than a building. It is a symbol, a monument of faith, a testimony, a promise, and a hope. The Karlschule is first and foremost a symbol. It stands as the visible sign that in Catholic Austria, Protestantism has had an emerging history. There's a lot that could be said about this history, but I'm going to skip that. After the counter-revolution in the late 1600s, Evangelical or Protestant schools were closed, and education and public religious exercises went underground. For 6 generations, that's about 180 years, that's a long time, Protestants in Austria waited for a better day. When Emperor Joseph II ruled, tolerance was revived, and temporary shelters for education were permitted. In 1858, sentiment and agreement enabled the Protestants to launch the building project for a school which was badly needed. So, along with subscription funds, the city of Vienna gave funds. The emperor then, Franz Joseph I, dedicated a site for the construction of the building. Theophil Ritter von Hansen was chosen as the architect. This guy is important to our story. Theophil von Hansen was a Dane, and he had worked 10 years in Athens, Greece, building large, important structures, including their Academy of Science and Observatory. In 1846, he moved to Vienna, where he also led in the construction of notable works, including the Austrian Parliament. So here he is, asked to create plans for the Evangelical School. He agrees and recognizes that the building would be the symbol of the acceptance and recognition of the Protestants in the Catholic country of Austria. The school building took place in 1861 and 62 and became a top scholarship place and a reputation for many, including some of the Catholics there. So remember the year 1862. Now, think of the year 1938. What was happening in Europe in 1938? War clouds rolled over Europe. Hypocrisy and deceit were the order of the day. The school became a part of a forced treaty by the town council, and from then until the fall of 1944, that's 6 years, it became a public school, run and oriented toward the opposite things for which the school had been dedicated. We're getting there. The boys are coming. Their faith is being witnessed to. Jesus' face is shining, but first, more bad news. In the winter of 1944, and most of us can remember how old we were then, the Nazi SS troops moved into the Karlischule and made a barrack of the building. The school had escaped some terrible bombings when lots of buildings in the area had been destroyed. But now, by deliberate design, big trouble was coming. The Nazis were using the school building to store lots of ammunition and explosives. On April 9, 1944, the Allies were moving into Vienna, and the Nazi army didn't have time to remove the ammunition from the building, so their military strategy was that they would destroy it rather than have it captured. They decided to set fire to the building. And as soon as they retreated, the fire would ignite the explosives. So to make certain that this would happen, the fire brigade was ordered out of Vienna and Nazis cleared the building and the immediate occupants. They set fire to different parts of the building using school benches, library books, uniforms, and any other material that would nourish the flames. Then the Nazis left Vienna. But as soon as the Nazis were out of sight, the inhabitants of the building, with the help of many neighbors, rushed in and began carrying out the ammunition. Despite the danger to their lives, they made trip after trip until finally all the explosive material was safely out. But by that time, in spite of all their efforts, the fire could not be controlled. They had to leave the building itself and its other contents to the flames. The Karlischule burned for 2 days, and when the smoke cleared, the symbol of Protestantism was a gutted ruin. Now the part of the story called a cooperative peace project. From 1944 until 1953, 9 long years, the building lay in ruins, subject to vandalism, while many obstacles were being worked out to eventually return the property to the evangelicals in Vienna. Of course, money was a big problem, but there was another one that had to be overcome. Remember the architect, Theophil Ritter von Hansen? All the buildings in the city of Vienna, which had been the work of this famous man, in tribute to the master architect, were declared to be national monuments. This meant reconstruction couldn't proceed along economical and functional lines, but had to be redone in keeping with the plans of almost a century before. Finally, an agreement was reached. The interior of the Karlischule am Karlsplatz would have the interior modernized, but the exterior was to remain as originally planned and built. With the help of the Lutheran Church in America, fundraisers, and other donations, a firm was hired to remove tons of rubble, put a roof over the structure, and a few other major tasks. But in short time, the money was gone, and this firm was dismissed. Finally, we're back to 1953 and Don Dernbaugh. Don sensed the need and the significance of the school, and he got things moving. In early November 1953, Paul Weaver of Huntington, Indiana, was assigned to the relief work in Vienna through Brethren service. Most of his work at first was truck driving and handling relief goods, but he became the first member of the Karlischule unit. During the first week of January in 1954, 2 more boys came to the project. They were Howard Ogburn from Maryland and David Brightbill from Elgin, Illinois. Until the weather got warmer, they worked with Paul at Helsberg. That was the relief agency. Since his 1W time was up, David, who had just gotten there, left early in March, but he was replaced by Harry Berkey from Pennsylvania. So there were Harry and Howard tackling the big job of tearing out the spiral stairway, which went from the basement to the top of the school, 5 floors high. Much brick, stone, and concrete made a great deal of work. Some walls surrounding the stairway also had to be removed. Working through that summer of 1954, and with the help of a weekend work camp in May and an international work camp in July, the job continued. In early fall of 1954, as had been decided before, 2 more boys were added to the unit. They were Wade Bollinger of North Manchester and Harold Gross from Ohio. Now there were 5, and they continued tearing out rubble. Then the Mennonites became interested in the project, and after discussion with the Austrians in charge, an agreement developed which became a joint PAX unit with the Brethren Service Committee and the Mennonite Central Committee. Merlin Garber writes, "It should be stated here that in the beginning, as well as throughout, the representatives, that's the boys, labored all relationships in the Christian spirit of give and take to formulate the coordination of the 2 1W programs. That they were men of vision is attested by the fact that for almost 7 years more, they were to work together in unity and harmony under many adverse conditions. Eventually, a unit of 5 brethren and 5 Mennonites worked together with young men coming and going as their 1W terms indicated. From the outset, the volunteers who worked on the building were not professional craftsmen. They were American boys, fresh from the farms or cities with no previous training. This fact caused great concern among the Austrians, who thought the use of unskilled labor was impossible. But they had no money to hire skilled masons and so forth. So with no funds available, these boys took up the professional jobs and did them with such finesse that the whole city was impressed. Even the most skeptical had to admit that the conscientious objectors from America could do, without prior training, what the workmen in Europe had taken years to learn. One of the things which Karlischule taught those who were in charge of such programs was that a man can be trained on the job. Give the boy a little demonstration and a little time, and he was soon professional in his technique. There were some masons from Vienna who helped, but not many. This fact alone, that the unskilled boys could do it, was not the only amazing thing. The group of men, or the boys, were working for conscience's sake. They were anxious to give a testimony to their faith, which resulted in commitment to long and hard working hours too. And they found that because these boys were untrained, it made it easier for them to adapt to the old Austrian methods of the reconstruction than if they had been skilled craftsmen who would have probably been frustrated with the old systems of doing things. The details of this work can be found in the booklet written by Merlin Garber in 1983. Some of the frustrations the PAX unit had to put up with were delays in receiving supplies, and then doing piddling jobs such as sweeping floors and mending cracks, instead of reforming the lions' heads or pouring floors. In the later years, groups moved in to use the completed areas and got in the way of the workers. The boys always administrated their own affairs, made their own decisions, and with supervision of only the Austrian work supervisor, engineer Reinhold Liebe, they ran the project. The American boys, all conscientious objectors to war, wanted to be a good witness to God and their beliefs. Pacifism for them was not political, but a human expression of God's love for everyone. They were giving a practical demonstration of the will and way of Jesus Christ, their Savior. Along with the hard work they put in on the rebuilding of the Karlischule, most of the men, as they certainly became while they were there, had personal ways of witnessing for peace in that community. They believed in face-to-face encounters, so they joined youth and church groups, visited in hospitals, planted gardens, handed out relief goods, and gave temporary shelter to refugees, among other things. They practiced their belief in many and varied ways. The head superintendent of the Evangelische Kirche in Vienna, Georg Traur, said of them, the members of the PAX team worked with genuine interest and inner devotion. For them, it was not only a work which served peace, but at the same time was a contribution to peace. By this, they helped their partners in belief, who together with them witnessed to the biblical truth in the solution of a problem that went beyond their own strength. One of the finest commendations to the work of the boys was a simple statement, and here's a quote: "The government department responsible for national monuments has recognized favorably the completion of the front facade. Normally, this department made severe criticism of restored monuments. They found much fault with the persons responsible and demanded much reworking. So, to receive approval for a completed project was a severe test of the workmen. But this exacting department, upon inspection of the work of the PAX unit, gave no criticism whatsoever. This was indeed a tribute of the highest order to the fellows who had done nearly all the work, under the direction of Engineer Liebe and his very small Austrian crew." My husband, Don Willoughby, was part of this PAX unit from August 1956 through into August 1958. Sorry. I was there as co-director with Don the summer of 1958 for the Junior International Work Camp. While I was there were no stairs to the upper floor. We still had to walk up ramps. Our work was mainly cleaning bricks, doing some plastering, pouring some cement, sweeping floors, and so on. And so all the work that continued made the place very dusty and dirty. The restroom had only cold water and often only a shower curtain for the wall. Our girls had stayed in using cots in one of the classrooms at one end of the third floor, and the boys were somewhere at the other end of the third floor. The PAX units had been provided with matrons, some young, some not so young, who did their cooking and laundry for the most part. But our work camp did our own meal preparation, and if you're seeing a picture of us, the older lady there was eventually sent to help with our meals, because these young people, teenagers 15 to 18, weren't experienced in cooking. And even though we had national nights for our meals, we needed help for some of the others. We worked hard, we played hard, we made field trips into the city of Vienna, we took a trip on the Danube River. We had daily devotions prepared by the work campers, national nights in which they explained things about their own country. It was a stretching experience for all of us. And at the end of that work camp, Don and I got married in the Protestant church with Greg Trar, the Lutheran head man, and Engineer Lebo walked with Don, and Tom Pops, Pauline's son, walked with me as we went forward for our wedding. So it was a very meaningful time for Don and me to go back to Vienna in May of 2001 for the dedication service and to see the fully restored building and all the activity that continues in it today. That was a very nice trip. The plaque, I don't know if you're seeing the plaque right now. The light on it isn't good on the picture, but this is what it says. From 1954 to 1961, volunteers from the Church of the Brethren and Mennonite churches in North America, under the supervision of engineer Reinhold Liebe, helped to rebuild this school in the cause of peace and reconciliation. And then, of course, it's repeated in Austrian Deutsch. The motto of Christopher Sauer, "For the glory of God and our neighbor's good," is shown clearly in this project. I'll be glad to take questions if you have something that you'd like more clarity about, and I can answer. I guess it was pretty clear. Okay, don't forget to tune in this afternoon for the chat at 2:30, and feel free to come October 22 to the Timbercrest Seniors for Peace program. Thank you. I guess we're turned on.